Hello, I'm Neelima Chitkopekar, and today I'm going to be talking about Shiva, one of the greatest gods of the Hindu pantheon. A god who has encompassed the entire geographical span of the Indian subcontinent and beyond, a god who has endured for many, many centuries, many thousands of years. A god who has a lot of iconography revolving around him, a god who is depicted in thousands and thousands of different ways, a god who is spoken about very highly today and from time immemorial. The specific feature that I'd like to talk about today is the kind of relationships this god had. Here is a great god who is supposed to be and who is called, one of his greatest epithets is Mahayogi, which means the great yogi. The great yogi, that is the great renunciant, he who renounces the entire world, he who is not interested in any aspect of the world, not interested in marriage, not interested in anything materialistic, who wants to just go away into the mountains, dwell there by himself, find a clearing, sit down in a yogic asana and meditate quietly, eyes closed, not a soul stirring around him, or at least he doesn't feel anything stirring around him. That's what he actually wants. But here is a god who, through mythology, we find, is brought into the fold again and again. The mythology, the yearnings of the people who wrote these myths about him, who dreamt these myths about him, who relished these myths about him. We hear in these myths again and again that he is brought into the family fold, he is brought into the material world, albeit reluctantly, a little bit reluctantly. And here we find how his relationships flower with this kind of almost reluctant family man, Shiva. The first person I'd like to take up, the first goddess or the first person in his life that I'd like to take up is Sati. Here we find that he was married to two wives. Both of them, the younger one, Parvati, was an incarnation of Sati. But the first wife was Sati. And even then, Shiva is brought into the fold of marriage because there is a need, there is a worldly need. The world desires Shiva to get married. Because whatever Shiva does unsettles the entire world. If he's a single man not getting married, that is unsettling to the world. The world cannot function. They require Shiva in the fold. If he's married and his lovemaking is taking too long and it's too tumultuous, even that is causing problems in the world. Everything Shiva does causes problems. And this is where we see the paradox of Shiva. This is where we see the imperfections of Shiva. Because even though he's a great god, again and again he has to compromise. Again and again he has to stop and think, what move am I going to make next to make it comfortable for the world that worships me, to make it comfortable for me and my family? But anyway, his first wife is Sati. He gets married to her. And there's a beautiful relationship between the two of them. We hear lovely myths and lovely legends in which she loves him from the moment she's born. The first word that she utters from her mouth is Shiva. And she falls in love with him and she wants to marry him. And with great reluctance, her parents get her married to Shiva. And she goes into his Kailash, into her home there. And she's having a beautiful life until she gets to know that her father is having this huge yagya, this huge sacrifice, a huge feast in which people are called from all the different worlds, from all the different levels of the entire world. And they are not invited. Now, before that, I'd just like to briefly say that Shiva is an outcast of a god. He is an outsider of a god. When you look at the Hindu pantheon, he is a god who roamed around nude. He is a god who roamed around with ash smeared on his body. He is a god who had matted locks, what is called Jata Mukuta. He is a god who has serpents clinging and going up and down his chest. Everything that is outsider in nature, everything that threatens the world, things that are poisonous to the world, Shiva seems to adopt them and adapt them to his environment and to himself. And yet we find, despite that, despite going away from the beaten track, despite being someone who does what he thinks is right, Sati, who is brought up in a beautiful household, in a very ordered household, compared to the disorderly life of Shiva, falls in love with him. And her father cannot stand him. So herein we see the classic relationship, which you see in so many Hollywood films, the father and mother hating the groom the bride is wanting to bring home. Here we find the girl longing and yearning for Shiva, and we find her father called Daksha completely disenamored, completely hating the man. And we find there are so many philosophical reasons why he can't stand him. We find that there are many reasons which you can reason out if you go into theology. But one of the basic reasons is, how dare my daughter fall in love with this man who doesn't even have respect for me, who doesn't even dress properly, who doesn't go around with nice friends, who doesn't even have a proper occupation. Who is this Shiva? A classic case of tension between father-in-law and son-in-law. So here we find that this lovely couple is not invited to this huge feast, to go back to what I was recounting. And what happens then is Sati forces herself to go. Now, this is the beauty. Shiva is a great god. But Sati, all his wives, Sati and Parvati and Ganga, we have these three important women in his life. Ganga, whom he seats on his head, the great river. Parvati, his actual spouse, who we know even today. And Sati, his first wife, who had a very tragic end. All three women are very powerful goddesses. And this itself speaks to us about what kind of man Shiva was, what kind of personality Shiva was. He could deal with an egalitarian and equal relationship with his wife, with his spouse. And there was always a give and take, a listening to of each other. There was never, I am the Lord, I am the man. And this is really very surprising in a largely patriarchal society, especially if you look at ancient times in India, very patriarchal. But you find that here is a god who bows down, who cows down in front of his god, in front of his wives, who themselves are very powerful goddesses. That he should marry powerful goddesses. That in itself is very telling about what kind of god he is. So therein Sati says that I'm going to go regardless, whether you come with me, whether you don't come with me. I want to see my father, I want to see my mother and my sisters, and I'm going to go. And here we find that Shiva gives in, though he's very fearful of what the outcome is going to be. The daughter going uninvited, the daughter going to the father's house, the father who cannot stand Shiva. But he lets her go because she fights with him. And this is very beautiful, the way you can see. It's beautiful because you can actually see a god and a goddess in a completely household, in a household of, in fact, modern times, where the husband is saying, don't do this, I don't think you should do it, it's not right. And the wife, the goddess, insisting, no, I'm going to go. And eventually she gets extremely angry. And she said, don't you know that one of my incarnations is the great Kali herself, is the great goddess Kali. And I can become that in one moment. Let me go. And in fact, he gets cowed down by her. Against his best wishes, against many a misgiving, he allows her to go. Allows her to go to the father's house. But it's very beautiful what we see in many of the scriptures, that even though she is so angry with him, she's lost her temper, she's gone off in a huff, he sends all his ganas, that is, he sends all his followers, his cronies behind her. Go take care of her. Put an umbrella on top of her. The sun is harsh. The rains might come, anything might happen. And he lets all these people accompany, even his own Vahan, that is Nandi, the vehicle that he rides on. He says, Nandi, go with Sati, be with her, take care of her. Loving husband, again a very loving husband. Eventually, after an arduous journey where Sati cries her eyes out without Shiva, unhappy that Shiva is not coming with her, we find that she reaches her father's threshold. And there she's extremely upset to find that so many people have been invited and she and her husband have not been invited. When she goes there and she meets her father, instead of him hugging her or greeting her beautifully, like she would expect a daughter to be greeted who's coming after so many years after she's been married, he starts condemning her and asking her why did she come, and starts condemning her husband. And there she tells him, how dare you talk about my husband like that? But he goes on and on. Here is the man who goes around wild, naked, singing obscene songs with obscene friends, and he doesn't have any respect for the caste system, for the orders, the social orders, nothing. He's such an outsider, such an outcast, and you went and married him. And after some time, she can't take the insults anymore. And instead of wanting to go back to her husband, her own pride makes her actually kill herself. Through a yogic means, it's like a self-killing. She just gets into a tapasya mode, sits down over there, and she collapses and she dies. Now, what happens is where Shiva comes in, and what is so beautiful about this story is everybody is upset to see she's dead. But Nandi and all the followers who had gone there with her, they go and inform Shiva, and he comes in a complete angry, lost his cool, lost his temper, lost everything. After all, he's lost his beloved wife. And what is so beautiful about this God, who's supposed to be dangerous sometimes, who's supposed to be powerful, who's supposed to be almighty, the greatest of gods, called Mahadeva. Here we find when Shiva comes and he finds his wife on the ground in that manner, after he destroys the feast and he punishes the father-in-law by decapitating him, we find he picks up the dead body of Sati, his wife, and he puts her on the shoulder, and he just gets into this mad frenzy of a dance, which is called the Tandav dance. And he dances wildly with tears pouring down, completely grief-stricken and completely unbothered about what anyone is going to say about this man going wild with the love of his wife who has now passed away. And to me, this resonates in a very beautiful way, because I have found that men are not supposed to cry. The specific thing that you hear, men should not cry, men should be brave, men should not show their tears. It's only women who cry, it's only girls who cry. But look at Shiva. Look at Shiva, the way in this beautiful myth, which almost everyone knows about in the Indian subcontinent, how he takes his, and he cries over what? Not over a dead mother, not over a dead father, but a dead wife. That is how much he loved his wife, that he could cry openly. And eventually all the worlds were disintegrating because of his grief. Because like I said earlier, Shiva can't do anything without the whole world getting disturbed about it. Now when he's grief-stricken and he's doing his mad dance, the whole world, the rivers are not flowing in the streams that they should flow in, the seas have stopped, the flowers are not, the trees are not flowering, there are no flowers, there are no birds chirping. None of the normal things are happening according to the Purans, which are the great scriptures. We find that everything has come to a standstill and everybody is extremely disturbed. And this is where we find that Vishnu comes in. Vishnu, who is a rival of Shiva, another very great god of the Hindu pantheon, Vishnu comes in and saves the world by dismembering the body of Sati, so that Shiva will no longer mourn for her, because as long as she's there in a body form, he's going to keep her on the shoulder and just keep dancing wildly and not be able to accept the death of his wife. So Vishnu comes in, she's dismembered with his chakra, with his discus, and parts of her body fall in different parts of the country. And we find that Shiva, who is so grief-stricken, goes back to his meditation, goes back to the mountains, goes back to his loving tapas. And here we find also a kind of sadness, that here is a man, we can call him a man. Here this man, this great god, did not want to get married, did not want to come into the fold of marriage, but did so because his worshippers wanted him to, because his believers wanted him to. And once he comes into the world of marriage, once he comes into holy matrimony, we find that look at how disappointed he had to end up being. Because he goes back even more saddened, even more disturbed, because he no longer has his wife. And he goes into tapasya again for thousands of years, because everything in Hindu mythology is thousands of years, millions of years, not to be disturbed again. So this is the story of Sati, which I feel talks to us openly. If you look even at what roles gender should play, what roles should a man play? Can a man actually cry? Can a man actually show grief over his wife's death? Can a man have such strong bereavement that he doesn't immediately go and get married again, but goes into the mountains to feel for his dead wife? A role model for men in this world, a role model for men in India, a role model for everyone, which we don't realize about Shiva. Because when we look at Shiva, we only see, oh, he's a great god. He's so powerful. He's the god of destruction. He's even sometimes looked upon as the god of death. But what I'm trying to say is, he's so much more than that. And that's why he appeals to people across the spectrum, across different sections of society. Now, eventually what happens is Sati, he tries to forget Sati, decides never to marry again, and goes into the mountains to do his tapasya. But then again he's brought into the fold, and we see another very powerful and beautiful relationship with him and Parvati. Again, Sati is reborn as Parvati. She again desires to marry Shiva. Shiva again doesn't want to marry anybody at all. She has to do all kinds of things to get his attention. And she says, what better way to get his attention than to do tapasya, that is to meditate just like he meditates. So she goes and she becomes a tapasvini. She herself becomes a yogini. She goes into the mountains and she sits there. She doesn't eat anything. She doesn't drink water. She sits and meditates for a long time. And eventually he wants to marry her. He's intrigued by her and he marries her, and they fall in love and they have a very beautiful relationship. When I say a beautiful relationship, I'm not saying it lightly. I'm saying it in a way that I put forward when I talked about sati as well. It is an equal relationship. Now, why I keep emphasizing equal? Because other gods in Hindu mythology, other gods in the Hindu pantheon are not necessarily having the same kind of equal relationship with the goddesses. I mean, I don't want to cut Vishnu short, but Vishnu is very often depicted in sculpture with Lakshmi massaging his feet. She's sitting right at the end massaging his feet, or she's sitting between his legs, between his feet, and always minuscule in size, whereas he's anatomically big and correct. She's like a little doll between his 2 feet. So we find there's a very big contrast between how Lakshmi is treated by Vishnu and how Shiva treats Parvati. So if you look at the way Shiva treats Parvati, we find that in the Purans, in the old scriptures, we have these lovely tales of Shiva and Parvati doing the most nicest things together. And this is another aspect of Shiva which I find very enchanting. They seem to go horse riding. They seem to go swimming together. They're involved in aquatic sports. It's written like this in the Purans. They actually go into the water and have all kinds of games that they play. And they sit for hours discussing the ways of the world. He thinks she's intellectually up to the mark. He knows that she's intellectual. She, of course, is a great goddess in herself. She's the great Devi. She's Mahadevi. So he sits there and he talks to her and she talks to him, and they discuss matters of the world. And that's how they spend the thousands of years that they spend together while they're married. But we also find that sometimes, as loving as this couple is, as loving as any couple may be, there will be times when there will be strife. There will be times when there will be tensions. There will be ego clashes. And that's what happens between Shiva and Parvati. And I'm thinking to myself, what a great God is this? What all am I going to see in this God that I can directly relate to my own life? Here the two of them are sitting down in one episode, one very well-known episode. The two of them are playing a game called Chaucer, which some historians believe chess is derived from Chaucer. It's a board game, and they sit down and they play the game of Chaucer together. And what happens is, very often we hear that Shiva is never alone. He's a man's man in a way as well. He always has his cronies, and he has his men sitting over there, all of them just sitting there and egging him on all the time. Oh, you have to win, you're the greatest god in this world. And they don't really like Parvati that much. I mean, like husbands, friends don't really like the wife. They think she nags a bit too much. And we have episodes where we hear about all this. And so usually they manage to egg Shiva on, and he wins. In this one episode, when they're playing this board game, Chaucer, we find that Parvati is winning. And these people are egging him on. And like I've written in one of my books, they start singing tunelessly to distract her. They start saying, you're a cheater, you don't know how to play. They start saying all kinds of mean things to her so she can get distracted from the game and she can lose. But eventually she wins. And then comes the fun. And this I find that when I have told this story in the various universities in America when I was traveling and giving a lecture tour on my first book, and I found that when I gave this, it really resonated with students. And I'll just tell you what they told me. When I told them the story, they said, my God, this seems to be like strip poker. And let me tell you why they said that. Because what Parvati does is she says, okay, Shiva, you've lost the game. Now give me that moon that you have on your head. Shiva goes around. He's called Chandrasekhar, that is with the crescent moon on his head. The moon is placed on his head. You see any of the icons or the pictures and the moon is there. So she says, take off that moon and give it to me. You've lost your game. I have won this in this game. So he takes it off. He gives it to her sheepishly. She annulates it. She makes a hole in it and she wears it as an earring. Then she looks at those slithering snakes which she can't stand, but she says, give me your ornaments. Those are his ornaments mainly, snakes. So she takes off the snakes, she puts them on one side, but she takes it from him. She knows he loves her snakes. Then she makes him take one by one everything that he could be wearing. She says, take it off and give it to me. You've lost your game. And finally she says, looks him straight in the eyes and she says, give me your loincloth. And that is where all the students in America started laughing and they said, here is Shiva Parvati playing a game of strip poker. So, she says, give me your loincloth. And finally Shiva, who had been so sheepish and quiet till this time, says, "What kind of wife are you? What will the world say? You're making me become nude?" And she just scoffs at him, and she reminds him of previous myths where he roamed around without any clothes and enchanted a whole lot of women who were seduced by him and followed him into the forest. She says, "Do you remember what you did in that forest episode? That's what you did, right? You're used to going around. You're, after all, the sky itself. You can go around without any clothes. Take that loincloth and give it to me right now." And I think at the same time when she realized how shattered he looked, because he tried to fight with her and said, "What kind of wife are you? What will people say about us? How obdurate are you?" And that's when she says, she decides that, okay, enough. But at least she got into this tussle with him. What I liked was the heated this exchange that takes place between the husband and wife, which is so human in so many different ways, which is so human where Shiva is concerned, because he gives her the space to be this way. He allows her to speak her mind. He allows her to accuse him. She allows her to get away with whatever she's asking for. And I think therein lies the beauty between this couple. And it's not surprising at all, therefore, in my opinion. I was asked this question when I was doing my PhD by one of the supervisors. Why is it, Neelima, that so many girls fast on Mondays, which is the special day for Shiva? Why is it that these young virginal girls want husbands like Shiva? Look at Shiva. I mean, what kind of God is this? A strange God. Why do they want a husband like him? And that's when I replied to him. I said, Shiva is so colorful. Shiva is so alive. Shiva in his imperfections is so real. He's so human. Girls will want someone like that. This is someone they can identify with. And more than anything else, in this story of Parvati, Shiva is ready to have an equal relationship with his wife. He is ready to give in. He is ready to be subsumed by her. He is ready to be trampled by her, like the way you see Kali trampling him in other episodes which are tantric in nature. He is ready to be fighting with her over episodes. He is ready to love her for thousands and thousands of years. And I feel that this relationship between husband and wife that gets exonerated, that is talked about, that gets exemplified in all the mythology regarding Shiva and Parvati, can play a great role in our lives. If we look at it deeply and see that a relationship has to be one of give and take, that if there is strife and if there is tension, there's nothing wrong in that. In fact, one should expect it. The idea is to reconcile. The idea is to try reconciliation. This episode was over a game of sport, a board game. There's another episode in which Parvati gets very angry because he accuses her of being dark-skinned. Now, here, I'm afraid I have to make it very clear, Indians don't like dark skin. And he's just calling her, he said, you're Kali, you're dark. Look at you. I mean, when they were making love and after they make love and they're lying together. And he says, look at my body, nice and white like a jasmine tree. And you look like a black cobra. You look like a black skin, your legs and your body entwined in mine look like a snake around a jasmine tree. And she gets so angry with him. And instead of saying, I am going to go, we have a lot of episodes in which she says, okay, I'll become fair for you. And the maximum of the episodes, she goes and she tries to become fair-skinned and she comes back as Gauri, which means fair-skinned. But in one episode, in one of the scriptures that I found, and which I found very interesting, she refuses to try and become fair-skinned. First, she gets angry with him and said, you're the one who's dark. You think you're fair? You're not fair. You put ash on your body. That's why you look fair. You're a dark one. Isn't your name Mahakal? And there's a pun. Also means time. He's the keeper of time, Mahakal. And so she puns on that. Kala also means black. So she's punning on the word and she says, aren't you called Mahakal? Don't accuse me of being Kala. And then she goes ahead and says, I cannot stay with you any longer. You have given me such a bad headache. I need to leave this place. I need to be by myself. And she goes away from him. So that's another important episode between the two of them, which is talked about very often. And he says, don't be mad at me. I was just teasing you. You are a great goddess. You are fair. Don't be angry with him. And he goes behind her and he's beseeching. And the episode ends over there. Parvati's relationship with Shiva very often borders on her being very human-like as well. It's not just Shiva, like I said. Parvati is also extremely jealous of sometimes what is called his co-wife, that is Ganga. Ganga, whom he seats on his head, is supposed to be his co-wife in a time when kings, gods had many wives. I mean, right up until the 1950s, even in India, you could, even a Hindu man could have a couple of wives, and it was not considered illegal. We find that Shiva in the south especially is depicted with two wives, that is Ganga and Parvati. And he seats Ganga on his head, and there's a whole episode how he takes the pressure of this mighty powerful river on his head, that once it's put on his head and it flows through his hair, his tresses, his matted locks, it won't come down harshly and ruin the world with its force and with its currents. So we find he seats her on the head. And there are these beautiful episodes in which Parvati talks about her jealousy. And in my book, I've gone a few steps further, and I've talked about how she tells Shiva that it seems like she's going to go into your ear and she's going to enter your body and get her away from there. She can see when we're making love. She can see when we're fighting. I can't stand the fact that she's seated on your head. And there's this constant tussle between Shiva and Parvati, which is colorful, which is robust, which is enchanting in its humor. And again, I feel that there's so much that we can learn from this kind of back and forth banter between the husband and wife. But ultimately, I also find that Shiva is the kind of god who will allow, only Shiva in fact will be a god who will allow this kind of dialogue to take place, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. I went through many Purans. There are like 36 Purans, 18 Mahapurans, 18 Upapurans, which I had to go through when I was doing my PhD on Shiva many decades ago. And I found that all the episodes would talk about how Parvati was yearning to have a son. Constantly she was trying to make Shiva make love to her so that they would have a son. But there was one particular Puran which talked about Parvati in a different way. And I'm not only talking about Parvati here, I'm talking about Shiva, who has a wife like Parvati, Shiva who can tolerate a wife who will say this. And I'm talking about ancient times in India. I'm talking about when the Puran may have been composed like circa 8th century AD, 9th century AD. Look at the kind of dialogue that takes place. So the two of them, Shiva and Parvati, are making love. And all the gods are getting worried because the love is so turbulent and the whole world is shaking, and they're making love for far too long a time. And another reason why they're worried is because they say, my God, Shiva's a great God, he's so powerful. My God, Parvati is such a great goddess. The two of them are so powerful. Can you imagine how their offspring is going to be? Once they have a son, the rest of us are going to be marginalized completely. And keeping this in mind, they said their lovemaking has to be interrupted. And they come and literally interrupt the lovemaking between the two of them. Now, most of the Purans, most of the episodes, because each of these episodes that I'm talking about are repeated hundreds of times in different Purans. We try to get the essence of them by looking at the different Purans. What is each one saying? Most of them say that Parvati burst into tears. She's extremely unhappy because she can no longer conceive a child, because they've been interrupted while making love. But in this one particular Puran, I find that she clearly says, and she says, I curse all of you gods, especially the main god Indra. I curse all of you because you have interrupted me before I could even be sexually satisfied. And that is, it's in itself very telling on the kind of relationship Shiva and Parvati had, where the woman's sexual satisfaction was as important as a man's sexual satisfaction. And that you could get a goddess to say this to a god, in front of a god, in ancient India, in patriarchal India. It's completely commendable, it's completely far-fetched, it's completely unimaginable, but it is actually there. If you read my books, you will find that I have quoted it with all the full quotations, with all the full citations. You will find from which Puran it has been taken. And this in itself is very telling of the kind of God and the kind of society that Shiva represented, and the kind of women that he was trying to put forward as being exemplary, as epitomizing what womanhood should be like. In the celestial world of Shiva, in the great family of the heavenly world, in fact, this is one God who has a family. You don't find Vishnu and Lakshmi have any children. The other great gods don't have children. Brahma and Saraswati don't have children. Shiva has two children. Both of them are sons. And one of the major gods of India today, whether it's Western India, whether it's Northern India, South India, is Ganesha, also known as Ganpati. Not really translated very well in English as the elephant god. Doesn't have anything elephant about him except his head, which is half elephant, and the rest of his body is that of a small boy. We find that Ganesha is the son of Shiva and Parvati, but his birth is not a normal birth. And I guess nothing is supposed to be normal in the celestial world. They are, after all, God and Goddess, and there has to be some kind of twist and turn to make it interesting. But what is interesting here is that Shiva sticks on. There's a kind of theme throughout where Shiva's life is concerned. He is, like I mentioned before, the Mahayogi. He is a renunciant. So even though he is cajoled into getting married, he does not want to have any offspring. Constantly he's moving away. Constantly he gets into dialogues with Parvati, and they have constant fights and arguments when she says, I'm dying to have the kiss of a son's mouth. I'm dying to have a son to cuddle and who would love me and who could be called my own. And he said, but I don't need a son. I'm never going to die. I'm deathless. People need sons because they want him to do their last rituals. Why do I need a son? I don't have anything materialistic that I want to pass on to a son. I'm not a worldly man. I'm a god who is a yogi, a Mahayogi. Please don't insist that I have a son. And eventually when she has a son, it is something that she does without the help of Shiva. And there's a whole myth over there where she creates this little dummy-like thing out of the dirt and the scurf from her body, and she breathes life into it because after all she is a goddess. And that little doll that she makes becomes this beautiful little boy whom she cuddles and fondles and loves as her son. But this is all in absentia, Shiva's absentia. He's not there. He's absent. He's gone off to his meditation into the mountains. She's in fact lonely. She's in fact very lonesome, and she decides to do this when he's not there. Another reason why she does it is not just her loneliness, but what is really amusing is that she tells her friends, her close friends, that I need my own guard at my bathroom door and my inner chambers. Because this Shiva, and this is very amusing to me that they should say this in a Puran, in a scripture. Shiva walks into my bath when I'm having my bath and doesn't give me any privacy. I have no privacy with him walking in whenever he wants to. What does he think of himself? And she's speaking about her own husband, a great god. I need a guard to stand outside my door. So there are two things that come up why she needs to have this Ganesha. One is the maternal love, and one is what feminists might like a little better. Oh, does every woman have to have maternal love? No. One is, I need somebody to safeguard my inner chambers. I need my own privacy. I need my own life when I'm having a long, luxurious bath. I don't want my husband coming barging in without knocking on the door. So she makes this Ganesha, whatever the reason, she makes Ganesha and plants him outside her bath. And what happens then is when Shiva arrives unannounced, he comes in and is ready to barge into the door again. And Ganesha is standing there. Now, right now, he's not half elephant. He's just completely human being. And he comes and they get into this tussle because he said, who are you? He says, I'm Shiva. Now, Ganesha knew about Shiva, but he didn't know that this is actually Shiva, because he's never seen him in his life before. He says, I don't care, you can't enter. He said, why? What do you mean I can't enter? He said, this is my mother's bedroom and bathroom. You cannot go inside there. Parvati has told me that you cannot enter. And he said, I can enter the entire world. There's any part of the world. I can enter all the heavens. Who are you to stop me from going into my wife's bedroom? And a huge fight ensues between the two of them, and eventually Ganesha is decapitated. And we hear about how the first living being that goes by, and that's an elephant, that head is brought and it's put on. It's almost like transplantation taking place in ancient times. A head is transplanted, and Ganesha is then has to be accepted by Shiva, because Parvati comes out. Now again, what happens? Not only is the son and the father's relationship, very awkward, and you can even think in strains of Oedipal conflict taking place between father and son for the love of the mother. The fact is that Parvati comes out and she gets enraged. She becomes her Kali form again, her angry form, what is called the Ugra form. And she says, you bring back my son to life right now, otherwise I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to destroy the world. Now again, he could easily say that, what was this boy posted outside, this handsome boy posted outside your bedroom? He could easily have any kind of argument, but he doesn't. He realizes that he's done something wrong, and he gives in over there. And therein lies again the relationship between Shiva and Parvati.
one of equality, one of listening to each other, one of taking care of each other's feelings, one of not ignoring each other.